If I could just speak to my fellow angry white American guys, give it up.
That's right.
My name is Megan. I've had an abortion. My name is Olivia. I've had an abortion.
Out and proud.
Trans members of this family.
Oh, I can't go on with this charade any longer.
Take ownership.
People are going to start thinking I'm a nerd.
It's all on you. Character is you do what's right.
What's up? We're live.
Hey,
We officially did it, and we have not failed yet.
cheers to that. That's an accomplishment.
Heck yeah, that's a good-looking glass. Do you prefer? So yours is a glass at top and square at the bottom. Yeah, that's not bad. As you consume more and more of this, your hand can move further down for a better grip.
There you go.
I think that's the whole is that you can grip it better at the bottom. I think that's what it's all about.
I think that makes sense. The more I have, the
Absolutely.
less I seem to really notice.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for doing this. A little bit last minute. I just sprung this on you a couple of days ago.
No, that's okay. I never thought that this would happen, but this is cool.
You have the setup for it.
Yeah.
Have you done podcasts in the past?
No, I tried like recording one once. Like, it's one of those things that will stay forever buried in my hard drive that no one will see or hear. But I've always wanted to, but I've never actually done it. This is the first one. So
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce your last name?
I don't know. Just kidding. It's
It's fine.
Allerheiligen.
Is that from what? Where's that come
It's
from?
German.
It is German. I figured it was German. My wife, her dad is almost full German. So
Okay.
our kids have a little German in them.
It's funny. I was for the longest time just under the impression that I'm 100% German. Because with a 13-letter long German last name, you kind of just assume, yeah, I'm pretty much German. Got the blue eyes down.
Yeah.
What else do you need?
Sure.
And then I did one of those DNA tests, and it turned out that I'm like almost 40% Scandinavian. Which
Oh wow.
is
Isn't
not
that weird? Those things always
Yeah.
screw up what your ideas were.
Yeah, completely. Well, and then they also, threw in at the very end. They're like, "Oh, you're also 18% Balkan," and I'm like,
Wow.
First of all, what is that? Is that a
I've
Star
never
Trek?
heard of that.
thing?
That too. I was like, well, I don't want to sound like an idiot. That was
No,
my
it's-
first thought.
It's we think it came from my dad's grandmother. She was a mail order bride, and we
I remember you saying
just
that. That is super interesting.
yeah. I mean, we don't really know much about her. I'm actually hoping to kind of do some digging and undercover. Maybe at least her papers for when she came over to the U.S., which was like I think right around the 1900s. So we kind of have widespread generations. So, it's 2-3 generations away, and it was like the 1800s already for my family. So
Dang.
it doesn't take much.
I'm a little envious of your setup because I need to get upgraded. I need to get that brings the microphone with because I want to sit back right now.
Oh yeah.
As soon as you get away from these things, it sounds like crap. So I need it right here,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't look great on video. I'm holding the microphone over my face. It could be an improvement for some of you.
Or just
So I
get a
have to-
really
I-
short
I-
chair, bring you
Well,
down.
yeah, that's the thing. So I'm in a trailer, and if you've ever been in a trailer, trailers have these things called slide outs.
Mhm.
And sitting basically, I'm straddling the slide out. The slide out. It goes up about an inch over the slide out, and that is where the front legs of my chair sit. So I either have to move it, too far, or too far back. So I'm sitting in a position where I'm not comfortable, but I've got it. This is the dedication I bring to this show. Is that sit forward like this the entire time.
These are the early days. You're gonna look back on these days fondly and be like, "Remember when we did the trailer days?"
It's gonna be like your podcast. It's going to be buried. I'll be like,
No, not at all. This is the foundation. It's good.
Oh yeah, exactly. This is the base. So the whole reason we've started this podcast, I mean, a few reasons, but one reason is we started this group called the Bettermens, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about, or maybe not. But you joined. It's basically a group of guys who have come to figure out how we can be men who take a stand rather than sitting passively and complaining about things we don't like in the world. And what I don't know what do you know what number you were? I know because we're like I was number something.
My
It
mom
doesn't
tells
matter.
me I'm number 1 all the time, but I don't know.
Oh,
Just kidding.
so sweet. That's right. You're number
No,
one.
I don't know what
Well,
number
that's
I
good.
am.
The guys that know what number they are weirdos anyway. We don't want to.
I don't even know how you would be able to tell.
It's because Discord is to everybody in there. So it's like I don't know what they call them, members or something in Discord. I think that's what they're going off of. I have no idea. But anyways,
Gotcha.
so I started this podcast. I've just been talking to guys who have joined our group here and are trying to figure this along with me. You're one of those guys, and I'm pretty excited about some of this so far. So I thought you were perfect to bring on this guest. You have a lot that we could talk about, and I don't know where exactly this conversation will go, but with your experience in Hollywood, you are a A-rated actor in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, of course. Every time you see those credits, they say Brad Pitt. They just haven't gotten the spelling right of my name. It's kind of weird, but well, I let them have that.
When you talk to people like you were, I don't know how you describe what you do, but if they hear like, oh, do something with movies or in the movie industry, are there natural assumptions? Do they start to ask that? Know any actors? Do you know? Is natural progression of the conversation?
It is a little difficult to describe what I do because if you don't say it right, they think you work in another type of film industry, and so you just have to make sure you're like it's with Hollywood. It's not doing other kinds of movies or anything like that. The kinds that you have to.
What kind of movies are you talking about?
But it's funny because like my wife actually pointed that out because I was describing it to someone and I'm like, oh, we hire people for films and they're the people that they get the job done and blah blah blah. And she's like, that kind of sounds like your work for a different part of the film world. I'm like, oh shoot. So most of the time, once I get past that, I mean, people don't usually ask if I've met or if I like work with actors because we specifically work with the background. So which are the extras? They're the kind of, we sometimes call them like they're the living props, which isn't meant to be mean towards them or anything, but they're the ones that set the ambience of a scene. If you're shooting a scene in a coffee shop, we hire the people that fill that coffee shop. So that's what I do. At least I assist with doing that. So it's, but it kind of came about in a weird way. It was not a job that I ever expected that I would be doing, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I do just enough and have worked around. I tell people I work in video. People that don't know just assume like, oh, it's one of the same. So you make movies? Is there anything that we've seen? And it's kind of the same conversation when people ask like, what do you do? I kind of like take a breath, like it's kind of is it going to be a conversation? It's not like a clearly defined like thick thing, sort of. I guess it could be, but most people don't know. Like if I tell them what I do, it's just like, huh? Because it's like a plumber.
Yeah,
I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's just I do like it's I don't know, a lot of little things.
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's such a spectrum. Like there, when I was in Hollywood working on a film, it was the biggest film since the start of COVID. It had the most background actors of any film since the beginning of COVID. So and
Can you say what film?
I don't think I can yet. I mean, we'll just say it will be coming out, I think, this December.
Oh, it hasn't come out yet. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy because I finished filming on that last October, and they weren't even going to begin the music for it until this past spring.
Oh,
so
wow.
It just shows you how long post-production takes. And I mean, we did, I want to say 3+ months of filming itself. So it was a big film. And it was all throughout LA and outside of LA. I think the farthest we went was 2 hours north, which was we filmed at this castle. So
oh wow,
I don't know if I could say much more than that, but it was very interesting. And in the midst of COVID, that also added a crazy angle to it. Probably can't
guess
say that.
The castle. Would you tell me which one it was? Tell me which one it was.
I can't remember which one. Um,
Well, the only castle I was going to mention, the only one I could think of, and I think it might be that, is Scotty's Castle in which is out in I've never been there. My wife has been there. It's in what the heck? There's a desert out there. I don't know. Anyways,
I mean, it felt like a desert because everything was so dry out there. I mean, at this point, I think 90% of at least Southern California is all dehydrated. So,
oh yeah,
it could have been a desert or it could have been less desert. But yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I was actually not doing the casting side of things when I was working on that film. I was working as a testing coordinator, which was scheduling all of the tests for all of our background actors, which was
interesting.
Again, a position I never would have anticipated doing, but it was just one of those things of by saying yes to it, it was kind of a type of obedience we were, my wife and I were doing. It was this big step of faith to go out. We were coming from across country, and it was just it was crazy. But yeah, that's Hollywood. It's a crazy place in general, which we learned.
Look at that segue. We are professionals, because that's the topic, and we have pre-selected. But before we get into that, I do have two standard questions I ask everybody. You're the third person, so I make it sound like I've done this 100 times. You're the third person to be asked these questions. So, first one, how do you define? Realize now asking this question is just going in a completely direction. We're getting back to the betterments. We're getting back to being better men here. How do you define a good man?
So for me, I typically think of people that have defined that for me, or at least who have embodied that. My father is a very, very good man, because one of the major qualities that he embodies is sacrifice. And so does my brother as well. So I tend to think of good men based off of, their works. And sacrifice is, I mean, historically speaking, the best thing any man or woman can do for someone is, to lay down their lives, literally and figuratively. If you, for instance, for my father, at least, he had so many different avenues that he could have gone in career wise, but, he chose to work more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did that. Dang, that was so good too.
You're good. He ended up going with jobs that were necessary to get the bills paid, and he worked hard, lots of hours, and worked his way up in those jobs. And sacrifice was just a huge part of that. And my brother also embodies that same thing. But I typically think of good men are those who are willing to, for the greater good, make decisions, not for their own well-being.
It's interesting. Never thought about. I guess it kind of wraps into how I would identify or describe. What's the word? Define a man based on works. I think because of my church background, you always hear like, well, you're what is it? It's a scripture in James. Those of you who know, I'm sure will respond. Something you're not judged on your works. Dang, that's going to bug me. Anyways, so I had this thing in my head where it's like, it's not about your works. So I've never really thought about it that way, but that is absolutely true. The ultimate thing you can do is to sacrifice yourself for somebody else at the end of the day. Because you think about, like, I'm a big, I always talk about how important my family is, and that's the thing that matters. That's what drives me. That is the why behind everything I do. And I've never really, I guess thought that again, like that is the ultimate thing you could do for some. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I like that definition. That's pretty good.
And without going too in the weeds on this one, but there was a stint recently where I went and pursued and got a data science certificate, which we'll see how that even does me any good. But one of the things when you're analyzing large sets of data is that you will group them based on their attributes. So if you think about it, how would you define a good person in general, or a good man? of course, with the Christian faith tradition, so much of it is also based on grace, because it's that gracious gift that God has given that allows us that salvation. However, when it comes down to like quantifying someone's belief based off of their works, that's where you're going to place them. Because if they have, a fixed amount of works that they've done, and only 80% of them are quantifiable as, or 20% of them are quantifiable as good, and 80 are bad. It doesn't necessarily mean that I mean, this gets into like lots of faith debates, so we won't go there. But the point is,
We can go
at
wherever.
what point do you
I'm
call
down.
them? What point do you call a person good, or are they defined as good? Or to use the word of to use the vocabulary of Scripture, where does their fruit show their life? And so fruits or works, it kind of depends on how you want to line that up. But I've always, kind of getting back to my dad, we were always raised to, have higher standards for ourselves, but sacrifice was a huge part of it. And he got that from, I think, his father a little bit, but just also his own faith. So it's been, something that's guided me, and to kind of segue, it's also guided me to this group, to the Betterments, because I recognize that this group has the goal of becoming better, of setting a standard for yourself. Which I think I kind of answered your second question.
Yeah, no, you did. It's perfect.
But I mean, and I find myself so many times where like I feel lazy, or I feel like, I'm just not meeting the mark. And it's not that it's a self-deprecating, like, oh, I'm such a failure, but it's like, I know I can do better. My wife deserves better. My family deserves better. And I want to honor my parents too. So that's really, I think, where the value is in this group.
It's interesting. Like, somebody posted in I'll reference Discord for those of you that don't know. We use Discord right now, primarily a way of communicating with each other as we're building this group out and figuring out what we're doing. But somebody had posted something the other day that I thought was so good. I wish I held up, but it was something to do with how we judge each other and ourselves, and how we primarily use materialism, most people, to judge in life. And I have absolutely found myself doing the same thing. Not that I'm going after material thing purposefully or mindfully, it just kind of happens. But I have noticed that I think of myself, I value myself too highly based on how much money somebody pays me, for instance, because to me that's kind of like, well, that's the world standards. How much value you bring to somebody else, to an organization, to a group of people. When you're trading your time, skills, what you have to offer for money, I found myself looking at like that as sort of a gauge. And somebody had posted in the group how it wasn't that long ago where you judged a man based on kind of what you're saying, works, not by the accumulation of stuff, but by his character and by how he treated other people, his family. And that hit me upside the head because I realized, dang, I have gotten so far from that. Like, those things I value, or at least I say I value, but I find myself be looking at like, well, how much is somebody paying? Keep using that as an example. It's more than that. It's all encompassing, but it's those sort of things I feel like I have myself to filter or see value by rather than character, than by sacrifice, like you're talking about. I think that's an area that snuck up on me. I didn't even realize it. Really, it's been through this group that's been sort of spotlighted in my life.
And that's another one of the benefits of this group. And, I encourage anyone listening to take this step. And even though I've been in this for such a short time, the benefit is that you have other men that can talk to you. You can be open with them about what you're going through, or at least glean from them on what they've learned. And that is as iron sharpens iron. that's such a benefit of being in a group like this, is that and you picked it up from this group without having maybe to experience the same hardship that someone else went through to gather that, nugget of wisdom. And, it kind of, as you were saying that, it reminds me of that old phrase that parents would use towards their kids, or, I'd even hear it in cartoons when I was growing up: builds character. And I didn't realize until, getting older and working jobs that I didn't maybe want to be in, that those were the things that taught me certain skills that I needed. They built up my character. And as you were saying, judging a man by his character, I think character is the accumulation of your deeds, but all of the work that you've gone through in life to get where you are. And I admire so many of the men that I've met so far in this group, because they've had life experiences. I mean, I'm not so much younger, but I'm younger than a fair amount of them. And just
say it, you're younger than me. I was pointing out, this isn't just a gray spot. This ain't, but I am extremely gray. So
that's okay. I'm I'm
making me.
No, I'm starting to like salt and pepper a little bit. You can't tell because I don't know. They're just anyway. But so many of the experiences that these other men have gone through, I can learn from those experiences without having gone through them myself. So it's another extremely good measure of character, which kind of going back to what you said about, measuring it by money or by what you've accomplished. Even success, money and success are a huge thing in our society that we tend to use for evaluating ourselves. And I mean, a huge part of that is because of Hollywood, which we'll go into in a minute. But that I had to learn that hard lesson at the start of COVID, because my background was in music, was in classical performance, and then when the pandemic, when you go back and edit this over, you'll have to like bleep out every time I say COVID. But at the start of that, I mean, music went away. It was no longer a thing. And I was doing it professionally. I was making enough, that a musician could to do that full time. But I had a hard reality check of that my value wasn't coming from that. Because I was asking these questions of like, am I a good husband? Like, I'm not providing. And my wife was such a trooper, because she at no point was like saying, you're not working. What's wrong with you? She was always very understanding, but I was very like, I was raised to work hard, and I was raised to that if you don't have a job, you really shouldn't be eating, or at least, you work for your food kind of mindset. But
that's a rare mindset today.
Oh yeah. That's well,
I don't hear that very often.
You could say I got my first job when I was 14, but before that I was like cutting lawns, and we had a grandmother that we adopted into the family. She wasn't our blood grandmother, but we would cut her, my brother and I would cut her lawn, and we would, that was our job. We had that responsibility every week. And so when 2020 hit, it was such a, and I like to keep track of the news. So I kind of saw it in January. I was like, oh my gosh, there's this stuff going on over in China. What's going on over there? That doesn't look good. Because I just could imagine, oh man, once this hits the news here in the US, this is all going to go to pot. And then, March, April, May, and then for sure by May, it was all kinds of shut down.
Yeah.
Even by April, I had a huge audition. I was so excited for, and they got canceled. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, like, where's my money going to come from? And again, that lesson, which wasn't overnight. It was, I would say, up until probably a year later, that I was like, okay, my value doesn't come from these things, which sounds a little contradictory in the sense that, we just talked about how working, you work for your food, but it's not the status of what job you're doing, or it's not the salary. Because I mean, there's so many men that work and women, but there's so many people in this country that work jobs that are just, most people wouldn't do. And sadly, they're not compensated for probably what they deserve. But yet, we look on them with so much appreciation. I mean, that's why I think that show that Mike Rowe did was so respectable, because it just was a total dive into worlds that none of us would literally ever step foot in if we had the choice. So,
well, not just that, but I look at up to from the past. I mean, I have no idea how much money it's not a thought that I have. One of the questions we ask is guys go through Bettermens, they fill out this form before they get through what we call in phase 1. And maybe it's not in there. Anyways, we ask questions throughout phase 1. And one of the questions is, who do you look up to? A lot of guys, talk about their grandfathers or just people throughout history that, most guys in the group anyways are like, yeah, totally agree to that. But never is the conversation wrapped around how much money they made or how successful they were. It was all about their character and what they gave back to people in ways that had nothing to do with money. So, I mean, I think how stupid it is really to assign to yourself to hold standard that's based upon money that nobody cares about. The people I care about most, kids, my wife, I mean, to some degree, but it's not that's not what matters. That's not what anybody really cares about. That's not what you're going to be remembered by. And yet it's an easy trap to be entangled and to be consumed by, to where your entire world is just built upon this thing that you do to make money. And so often for guys, the thing that they do to make money they care about. It's not something they're passionate about. It's not aligned with what they'd like to contribute to the world. There is a part that you're talking about that is providing for your family. That's just doing the work said for that. But when that thing that you're doing just becomes consuming, I think that's the difference. Interesting, because you don't see this so much in the blue collar world. At least I don't. I with companies that are in the blue collar world, the Mike Rowe workers of the world, I feel like have a good hand, a better handle on this work is being or as a part of their character. It's their work is contributing to what matters to their family. Whereas I find more when you get outside of that world into the college the white collar world, it really becomes about what you're earning from that. It's not about the character, it's about the money. It's interesting. I don't know. I mean that'd be a whole conversation, I guess, in itself, is where that comes from. But I think it's I found that to be true myself.
Would you say you gained that from having? I assume you went through some amount of college. Would you say that's kind of where you picked it up?
No, I went through very little college myself. I was schooled and did some community colleges because I wanted to go into film. So as much as I could with that, and then found, rather than going through college, there wasn't a lot of offerings for film schools at the time. There was New York and LA. There was a lot. Okay, so I got married really young and was like, I need to make money. So I just jumped into that world without any. So it comes more from, I think, the client work I've done. I've worked with a lot of different clients over the years, some who are very formally trained in their world, and other clients that are not. They're the blue collar people. And it's just interesting seeing what seems to drive maybe the majority. I don't know. There does seem to be a distinction there that you could probably pull out to some degree.
I wonder if, and I want to stay on our topic so that way at least the title matches what we're talking about. But,
this is good. I'm enjoying this.
I was thinking part of it, I wonder if it has to do with the amount of risk one takes, and I know that with some, there's a good chunk of blue collar jobs that require risk, but some would maybe say that, especially maybe in your high client work that you do, which I don't know what job, what realm you work in, but I could guess that with a certain amount of, the higher that you go, there's a higher amount of risk. And so that also contributes to how success is measured. How often, what's your success rate of, your, if you're maybe a stock person, if you're a trader, day trader, whatever, they measure their success by a certain percent. If you are 60% accurate as a day trader, that's pretty good. And so maybe that has to do with how we measure ourselves. Because if they then only have a 30% success rate, then they view themselves as not as good, but there's also that quantifiable, they don't make as much, or they've lost a lot more money. But in the blue collar world, as you pointed out, it's less so. That doesn't happen as much.
I think it also has something to a lot of, again, it's a generalization, but I think a lot of people who go after white collar careers that quote are a college education, I think that's less and less all the time. But anyway, folks who go through the crowd, I think, tend to do careers based on the amount of money that career makes. Or there's pressure from their parents to go into that. Whereas I see and have met a lot of people that go into blue collar fields more as a tradition behind it. There's a collective passion that's been passed through generations where it comes down to is pride. I find that there's a lot more pride in blue collar work, and people that I've met who work in blue collar jobs. There's a pride that comes with that more so than a lot of white collar were selected because I don't know, it paid well. And so that's the reason they continue that job, is because hopefully the goal is the why you got into this is the money. Whereas a blue collar, like, I don't know if that's true. And with our topic today, but I think it's interesting. And
yeah, I think it does actually loop in quite well, because
good.
You're seeing these days help wanted signs everywhere at these different businesses. That most of them, I would say, the help wanted signs I've seen are all at blue collar level establishments. And I think that actually you could probably trace a lot of that back to, everything that's happened during the pandemic. It's led to that, but it also, I think, has led to film and television and social media guiding the younger generation farther and farther away from that honorable tradition of working a job that has that kind of background. You think about, the TikTok generation. I doubt they're scrolling through hard jobs and thinking, oh, that's something I want to do. They're not looking at videos of extremely laborious work. Maybe there is a little, but I think a majority of their content is either focused on kind of mindless things, or it's focused on stars. And I'm guilty of scrolling through things. I don't have TikTok, but I have Instagram, and I've noticed more and more that you scroll, they have this new Reels feature. It's not really that new, but you find yourself scrolling, and like there's celebrities on there, and it shows these lifestyles that are just not what the average person probably has. But I think it kind of comes back to our topic for today, which is, how does Hollywood impacted more or less the what somebody pursues? And especially for a lot of men, it's not been encouraging. Hollywood has not encouraged men as of late to pursue manly qualities, which is unfortunate. I think it's been a huge contributor to, again, how people define success, and also, I don't know the statistic, but I do know that suicide has a higher percentage in men than it does in women, sadly. And I'm sure there's a lot of studies on why that is, or at least what the leading cause is. It's probably a number of things, but I know that success and being able to provide and all of those things are a huge part of where a man gets value. And so
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
he's then and women deal with this with a lot of body image issues, but if a man doesn't have the same kind of success that he is able to provide for his family, or even meet the expectations of his parents or whatever it might be, he doesn't have that same kind of value. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with that. A lot of it's based off of
100%. I feel like,
observation.
yeah, totally. But I do think that, like where we started our conversation, that in general place a lot more value on works, what they do, and women place a lot more value on emotion and relationships, which is why naturally more men, as they blue collar jobs that aren't really connected to people necessarily, they're connected to works, and tend to go into fields that are more connected to people, connecting with people and care. It's just a natural thing, and I think that that's absolutely true. So when a man feels like pulling his weight in a very practical sense, it hits him a lot harder. I think that's totally true, at least in my experience. We're guys, we know everything about men.
It's funny. I mean, one of the other topics that you and I talked about was, I can't remember how he worded it, but it was essentially how maybe it had to do with identity roles in marriage, or at least like, where men get their value from, or where women get their value from, and kind of where those definitive lines are, and how that's changed quite a bit. But even in my wife's and my relationship, I feel like kind of feel differently in some ways than maybe other couples do. Meaning, like, I tend to be more sensitive, like maybe not the typical manly husband, or at least what Hollywood says that a husband is supposed to be. Like we see in commercials, cartoons, movies, television. We see men as an idiot, or doesn't really care about the family, or at least they tend to make decisions that are self-serving, and the family just has to put up with it. I mean, Family Guy is a huge one. It's sad because what kind of standard does that set? And in some ways, then going into marriage, I got married at 25. Gosh, it's weird that you always remember the year you get married, but sometimes the age you can't remember. I think I was 25. When I was going and getting married, I had a certain standard for myself that was different than what Hollywood said, or these TV shows, these movies. And in some ways, I've always felt a little bit weird being more sensitive, or being conscientious of all of these things, not only work. My work ethic and all these things, but how I'm serving my wife, how I'm being sacrificial towards her. And so it's kind of been fighting against the grain. And I think we're going to see a lot of men come to this Bettermens group with that same sentiment of they're working against what Hollywood, or what the world, I guess you could say, is telling them how they're supposed to act.
I agree. I can to that, because there is a part of me had never connected with like that female, that kind of persona, is like, that kind of intensity, and
300.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there's a component of that's come to me, has become a part of me a little bit as I've gotten older. But it's interesting because one of the I've never been drawn to is that sort of just tough guy. I don't know how to describe it. When I was a kid, I hated trucks. The reason I was like, I'm a car guy. I didn't like that rednecky, just kind of like, I don't know, that idea of like, that means to be a man. I never connected with that. I've changed. I love trucks now, but I still have, there's a certain level of intensity that comes with like the alpha male. I am a huge Jocko Willink and a huge fan of what's the guy's name? He was a SEAL also. He just does like a million ups, and he does just saying. Anyways,
I was going to say Steven Seagal, but he's probably
Seagal.
He's probably not the
not the guy.
image you have in mind. At least
he's
the age he is now.
Yeah, exactly. So there's different levels and different strengths. Look at guys like Jocko Willink as the ultimate stereotypical strong guy. And we absolutely need guys like that in the world. I'm so glad there's guys like that in the world. There was my life recently where I was like, I need to, and I realized very quickly I can't even come close. And I out myself for a little while because I was like, damn, like I need to work harder. I need to be better. And there's a certain truth to that. I mean, I think as a man, you want to continually push yourself and become better, but that's not necessarily the goal for my. I realize that there is a place in our world where that kind of guy is needed, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to go to that same level. I look at another man who I look up to tremendously, Mr. Rogers, who I would say you could put on the opposite end of the scale. I think he's contributed in enormous ways, but in a completely different way. And there's absolutely a place for like Mr. Rogers in our world. There's a need for that. Myself being more where I'm at. I'm not the alpha Joe kind of guy. There's a part. I think there's a part internally of the majority of men that there's a competitiveness somewhat naturally. It doesn't mean it's in every guy, but there's a component of that where I see value in that and a pursuit of that. Anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is that as I have started to try to build out this Bettermens group, I think one of the things that I to create is not this idea to reach this incredibly difficult level. I see a lot of men's groups that I think have a play guys again that I think should go after that are much more I guess based on what would you call it, like I don't know, task based or intensity. Absolutely, just intensity and skulls and just militaristic. And again, I see so much value in that, but I also see that there's a place for men that see the value in the Mr. Rogers approach. There's there's value in also. I think what we've seen that we built through Bettermens is that the focus on putting yourself hard physically, but there's also a side of this that I'm trying to go after the just intensity constantly, because I thought of that in myself, and I don't know, I hadn't found a lot of places for guys like me that are like I want to be better, let's take it a notch kind of thing.
No, I think it's great, and I think a big part of what you're talking about is being aware and being introspective, teaching men that they need to be aware of their weaknesses, aware of their shortcomings, and work at those. For some men, they might be striving to become this big Hulk, when in reality, that's not the area they need to focus on. And, we think about, again, Hollywood and how it has painted the picture of what a man is supposed to be for decades. I mean, now it's over a century of, what men are supposed to look like. And I think we're getting a point into our society, though, where there's a need for men to just step up and be leaders. And a leader is it's a spectrum. You have the Mr. Rogers type. And it's funny you brought him up because I was watching a little bit from him earlier today. But then you have other leaders, strong leaders, militaristic leaders. I think of a boss I had in film recently, and just the amount of respect I had for this guy from what he had gone through in his past career in the military, just that he was able to bring so much stability to our team because he had actually been through war. And when you would hear him talk not only about the the horrible things he had seen in war, but also the things that he would deal with in his job since then. You know, he would do paramedic work, and just what he survived seeing. And so when it came to doing our jobs, which was, you know, very, very easy, you know, there's not a lot that you can compare to war or dealing with tragedy in the sense of being a paramedic. And so regardless, though, having a leader, and he wasn't, I mean, he was a very like well-built guy. He was, you know, very strong and all of this, but his leadership qualities were more impressive than that. And same thing with Mr. Rogers. You know, he's like the beloved father to many people who maybe didn't have fathers. And the thing I was watching this morning with him, he was talking about the struggle he was having with his show, because I mean, and I think this clip, it was black and white. So, you know, it was from quite a while ago. And then at that point, he was saying that he was struggling with his show because he wanted to introduce people being able to listen, and that there was too much noise and chaos in the world. But yet it was for him a kind of a contradiction, because, you know, you think of TV and television, it's noise and flashing lights. And so he was, I mean, you could see it in his face. He just had that confliction of, I want to bring this thoughtful silence to children or to people in general, but the only medium that, I mean, he was extremely successful at was television, which, besides his show and maybe a few nature documentaries, all of them are going to be loud and crazy. So it's, again, it just shows that you know, the power of television and movies is so impacting on our culture. And Mr. Rogers talked about it. And you even think before television, radio was equally as impacting. Kind of random. Did you ever, you know, War of the Worlds, how it started out as a,
heck yeah,
you know,
Orson Welles.
It started as a book, and then but did you know that it went from, it was a radio show after it was a book, and that it caused an actual like
panic,
which is
people literally rushing out of their towns and cities.
Oh yeah, I think that's like, in retrospect, it's really funny. But I could imagine, well, I mean, just imagine that, you know, you go from radio, which obviously had that much impact on people, and then in the early 1900s, then you have this new thing called moving pictures, and then eventually you start to incorporate sound, and then you start to incorporate color. But just the amount of impact that this has on our culture, you know, I don't know. In some ways, I could see, you know, someone from many, many centuries ago looking at the modern celebrity and equating them to some kind of demigod, you know, because they just have a status, they're untouchable. Like literally, one of the actors on the production I was on out in Hollywood, armored vehicle, lots of security, you know, it was like, and it wasn't just like, you know, a vehicle with plexiglass windows. I mean, it was like, they don't make this car an option that you buy. Like, you have to get this thing specially. Anyway, I mean, again, like, but this person is arguably like one of the biggest impacts on male role models, at least for the last several decades. I mean, in that being said, it's like, you see that change over the centuries, and it's, I mean, actually, one of our questions was like, who has been the most impacting male role model? And you'd asked me that question, but I'm curious if you had one in mind, that maybe this a celebrity that you thought, oh, that's the man that I want to be like.
Oh, that's you know, I didn't even think of that for myself. As far as a celebrity goes, I don't any celebrity that I think, oh, that's what I want to be self, except for if you're talking about a character, necessarily the actor playing the character, the most impactful character for me was Donald Draper in Mad Men.
Oh, in Mad Men. Okay, yeah.
Donald Draper, that character in Mad Men, that's the whole reason I started why old fashions are my favorite cocktail.
Yep.
I looked at that character and I thought, dang, that's significantly different than me. And that character really impacted the way I viewed myself, for sure. But
that's interesting. I mean, I hate to admit I haven't watched any of Mad Men.
Go. Dang.
Oh gosh.
Greatest series ever created.
I've seen enough clips and sound bites from the show. I totally get it. You know, he embodied a type of masculinity, which was kind of on like the Bond level in some ways. You know, James Bond had this classiness to him. You know, and my wife and I we talk about like, you know, what do you consider attractive? You know, you have different actors like Chris Pratt or Chris Hemsworth, and you know, it seems like Chris is just an attractive name, but you know, regardless, like there's these different levels of, and each one is different. You know, you might have someone who's more of a classy look, like what's his name, Daniel Craig. You know, who's doing the new the new James Bonds. You know, he kind of has a classiness, but yeah, he was also different than you know, Sean Connery or Roger Moore, I think that was his name. Different levels. I mean, and part of that I think comes down to taste, but also you know, the impact that it has on men and what they want to be is significant. Funny enough, the guy that I looked up to in Hollywood the most was actually Charlton Heston.
Oh,
I always, and it was because I was raised on like a lot of old movies, like North by Northwest.
Yes.
Like all the Hitchcock movies. I love those. Oh gosh, I mean,
too.
The I guess the way that these old movies told stories was always so strong to me. But Charlton Heston, especially in, I mean, you see it a lot in when he portrayed Moses in the Ten Commandments, but also in Ben-Hur. I don't know if you've seen that one. But the level of character development that he went through, and I don't know why I could see this at such a young age. You know, I watched these at 4 years old, 5 years old, which I don't know, maybe that's too young to show kids those movies, but for some reason I liked him. But I found his, like the leadership he had in the Ten Commandments was so inspiring. But then in Ben-Hur, you know, how much he had overcome, how much pain he had gone through, you know, being betrayed by his best friend, assuming that his mom and sister were dead, and then later finding out that they were worse than dead. They were lepers, you know, spoiler alert if you haven't seen that movie. But regardless, like his character development through those two movies and then the other movies he did, Soylent Green, probably less so, but did you ever see that movie?
I have not.
It's been years, but it's, well, I guess I could give away the ending on that, but this food that they serve for all of society, it turns out it's made from humans. So it's anyway, he was in that. I'm pretty sure he was in that movie. I mean, anyway, kind of got off on a tangent there because clearly he was like one of my favorite actors.
At least you brought it back to Hollywood.
Oh, well, it's he just embodied like this respectable, strong leader, and like I thought that was really cool. You know, and even today, I mean, a lot of people equate him with the NRA and, you know, his involvement with that, but I don't know. I've always thought like at least the characters he portrayed had like leadership, and that was always really interesting to me. But then you compare that to today. Gosh, I can't even think of like a modern. I mean, you could say like Chris Pratt, you know, would be like a modern, which I think he's got some really good qualities to him.
Yeah,
and,
I do too.
Especially, and this kind of goes to one of the other questions you had asked before the podcast was, you know, other entities that are doing Hollywood-esque endeavors. And so you think about Chris Pratt kind of got some flack recently because he was doing films like, or shows like Terminal List, or what was it? The Tomorrow War. Those movies, he portrays characters which he kind of caught some flack because they're more, I guess you could call them traditional in the sense that he's a strong male role model.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's I highly recommend Terminal List. We recommended it to my father-in-law, and he watched it all in one sitting. It was like, I think 7 episodes, so he really liked it. So, and he's Terminal List is about an ex Marine, I think. Maybe he was a Navy SEAL. I can't remember. But he basically,
where can you find it? What platform?
It's Amazon Prime, which is interesting because you ask about Hollywood and different things coming out of Hollywood, or the impact it's having on society, and how it seems like that is a little bit of a divergence from kind of the direction that Hollywood has been going for the last couple of years.
It's true.
But then you also have different groups like Daily Wire is putting out their production. They've started a production company. They put out a couple films, which I haven't seen yet. Have you gotten to see those ones?
Either. No, I really wanted to. I joined Daily Wire because I saw What Is a Woman? I joined Daily Wire. I wanted to watch that film, but I haven't seen any of their narratives. I know that they've
was
come
that
out
one
with,
good?
Western. Oh, it's fantastic. Well,
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I'd totally watch it. Side note, just to brag, because I'm a dad. My daughter went to premieres for that film, and she was on Daily Wire because she did a review, and Matt Walsh picked her review of the film to put on his personal Instagram. So
wow, that's great.
We were like, hey,
kudos to her. That's fantastic.
Oh man, I was running around because my mother-in-law was here. I was running around the property to everybody. I was so excited. I thought that was cool.
That's awesome. I just think it's great that you have a small company like that arguably in some ways is the opposite of Hollywood, but the medium of film isn't owned by Hollywood. And we keep using Hollywood is it's kind of, it didn't used to be that, but in the last probably 5-10 years, it's really become very anti-man or anti-masculine, anti-traditional traits that we at Bettermens are trying to go for. But even Tim Pool, I believe he and his channel are starting or have already started a company as well that's putting out content. I think they're even wanting to do cartoons if they haven't started already. And I just think that's great. And one of the points I wanted to make was that, Hollywood has had a monopoly on kind of saying what a man is for so many years that now that I don't know if it's become too woke that it can't continue to exist, or if it's just too big, or the definitions have become so blurred that they end up arguing with themselves on what is a woman,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just think it's so great that you have, it's great that your daughter got featured on Walsh on his thing. That's so cool because it just shows that there's, that they don't have the final say. They don't get to say what is a good man and what is not a good man. That is not a control that we should give them, or that we should allow them to have, because they don't have it. Hopefully that's
so
like
true.
a really hopeful thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and things are shifting.
And then when I saw you starting this group, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. This is grassroots, man. This is awesome. So let's get going. Let's encourage other men that, this is a place for you, that you can come and it doesn't mean it'll be easy, or it's not just like a club to hang out, and we're here to work. And
absolutely.
that's phase 1 is starting in 2 days, which I'm super stoked for it. And
Me too.
I'm going out of town for the first third of it. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to be different when I get back. So
that's that. Absolutely. Man, we need to do this conversation again. It could just keep on going. I have well, it's supposed to be an hour-ish. It doesn't have to be, but to run. So I want to keep talking. We should do this again for sure. I guess there was some kind of technical glitch happening on YouTube. Live stream this. We're recording this basically. I mean, once I collect about five of these interviews done, I'm gonna run out on iTunes and Spotify and all. And clean. We're recording clean audio and video, but we are live streaming these to YouTube. And apparently, it just fell up. So there's really nobody watching. But I wanted to have questions was the goal. But I don't know. If anybody's watching live, are you hear us? Because for some reason at 60 minutes on this platform we're using to record this, at 60 minutes it shuts off my view of YouTube. So I can't see. I don't think I can see any more comments. I can't. There's 0 people watching. I know there are at least a couple people watching. So I don't know. I don't know if we can do that. I don't think it's going to work. Oh
well, that's okay.
Next week.
This is the trial run, and it's the beginnings. I think the way this country started probably didn't look as glamorous as we think it did, but it.
Dang, I bet that is so.
But
we visited. Oh man, we do Philadelphia, and to one of the spaces they used to debate the Declaration of Independence, I think is what they were figuring out there. Am I totally wrong? Is it the Constitution? Constitution Hall? Where the heck were we? I don't know. That's hopefully nobody's watching anymore because I can cut this out of the audio.
I should know because I was looking this up recently. But it was, I think in Boston was where they had, was that where they did the signing? No.
I thought it was New York.
I think you're right.
Be totally wrong. Either way, early in the country's founding, there was a room in Philadelphia that they were debating it. And anyways, we visited this hall, and one of the thoughts I had is they talked about how they had to close it off from the public. The public was open. They were allowed to come in for certain parts of it, but in parts of it, they would close up. And the room, obviously it's warm. I mean, it's air conditioned. It's comfortable. But one of my thoughts was, dang, this was in a horrible place because it was in the middle of summer when they were meeting. It's all closed up. They wore 60 layers of wool. I was just thinking about the filth, the disgust. I mean, there were people who were riding horseback that barely made it to this meeting. They were filthy. They were disgusting. Just to paint the picture of what exactly the founding of this country not pretty was. I think very rough. So I think anytime I start to beat myself up about any of the stuff we're building with Bettermens, that is a good thing to think about. Is like okay, it can be rough. It probably should. Yeah.
That reminds me of one of the films I got to work on was News of the World, which was that Tom Hanks movie.
Oh, yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So I was doing background work on that. So I was one of the Civil War soldiers.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool.
I haven't watched that movie, so I don't even know if it's any good. So it's not, I don't know if I can recommend it, but talking about wool, oh my gosh. And yeah, it was. And then our shoes were like slabs of leather, there was no support.
Wow.
I tried to put these Dr. Scholl's in there, but it was a joke. It didn't even help.
Oh my gosh.
We had period accurate weapons. So we carried around these 12-pound, I don't even know what they were. I mean, they were long rifles, but it was heavy and it was hot and dusty. And I almost got run over by a cow. It was fun. Actually, I have a photo somewhere. I'll have to try and find it and send it to you. I took a photo on set of all of the cows that were around, and it was, and they were not super big, but they were bulls, and they were they tried to get them to kind of stampede through the town. So it was, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I get what you're talking about when you describe that. Yeah, it's that was fun. One of my. Yeah, that was one of the fondest memories. Next to being a zombie in, I think it was Army of the Dead. No, I can't remember. There's another one where I was a zombie. So it's
that's awesome.
Luckily there weren't zombies when they were signing the Declaration of Independence.
No kidding. All right, well, I think that'll do it.
Okay,
thanks for doing this thing.
Yeah, for sure.
The real version of this that gets released, the audio version will be a lot cleaner than this live version. Whatever.
Yeah. No, it'll be good.
Deal. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, cool. We'll see ya.